Good evening and welcome to a special edition of APTN National News. Tonight we are looking back at stories we've been following in Thunder Bay. In May 2017, the Ontario Civilian Police Commission began investigating the actions of the Thunder Bay Police Board. Tensions rose after the deaths of two youth, Tammy Kiash and Josiah Begg, who both disappeared May 8th and were later found dead in waterways. Neither death was ruled suspicious by police. There is a long context of these tensions. A 2015 inquest had previously raised questions about the investigations into the deaths of 7 First Nations youth who relocated to the city to attend high school. In September, the Independent Police Review Director held an open meeting to talk about the relationship between the police and Indigenous peoples in the city. APTN's Willow Fiddler was there.
The police watchdog in Ontario says the systemic review he is doing on the Thunder Bay Police Service is unprecedented because it's so personal to so many people.
I come to Thunder Bay and there's so much that people have inside them, and there's so much that people mean to do well and they want the best for this community, but they haven't had an opportunity to tell someone about it.
On Monday night, well over 200 community members showed up for that opportunity, including Mike McKay, Josiah Begg's grandfather from Kitchener-Magisub in Nunavug. The 14-year-old went missing last May. 2 weeks later, his body was pulled from the McIntyre River. McKay told the crowd he wasn't angry at Thunder Bay for what happened.
It's almost like one too many under the same circumstances. And what is it? That's what I'd like to know is, what is it? What's going on? What's wrong? Why in the same place?
McNeely started his review of the city's troubled police service last November after receiving a complaint about the death investigation of Stacey DeBungy, a First Nations man found dead in the McIntyre River in 2015. Since then, there have been similar deaths and similar concerns, including 3 river deaths this year alone.
People have alleged that there's racism, and that's what I'm looking at to determine if there's differential treatment or if there's racism or discrimination in how the police carry their duties. So that's a type of accountability I'm looking for.
People at the public meeting shared their experiences and recommendations with the director. McKay, who is a former police officer, said it's time to acknowledge the racism in the city.
We take our kids all across the country. People up north take their kids all across the country. They get other major cities, other urban centers, but they don't bring them home in body bags. Why Thunder Bay?
McNeely said the turnout was so good, he will hold another public meeting for more input. He is aiming to have his report completed by the end of the winter, at which point the police service will have 6 months to respond to his recommendations. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Families are still trying to come to terms with their losses and grief. The 2015 inquiry of the 7 students who died in Thunder Bay. Willow Fiddler attended the first memorial held at the Kiwewin First Nation to honor Kyle Morrisseau. Here's that story.
The Kiwewin First Nation is only accessible by plane. It takes about an hour and a half to get there from Thunder Bay. The chief says the community of about 400 people is tight-knit. So when they lost Kyle Morrisseau, it affected everybody. And today, they've come together to honor Kyle.
It's been 8 years since we've lost him. But through this, the inquest and all the recommendations, it was decided that we'll do something to mark this year's the day that 8 years ago that we pulled him out of the river.
For communities like Kiwewin, it's customary to have a memorial feast on the anniversary of a loved one's passing. This year, it's a little different for the Morrisseau family. Kyle's father, Christian Morrisseau, explains.
This is the first memorial that they're having for the seven kids, and in some ways, I'm glad it's our family to do it first, because
17-year-old Kyle Morrisseau's body was pulled from Thunder Bay's McIntyre River. Morrisseau was one of 7 First Nation students who died while attending high school in Thunder Bay between 2000 and 2011. 145 recommendations came out of an inquest into their deaths, including one that calls for memorial for each of the 7 students. Here in Keewaydin, that means holding a community breakfast where the school children are seated first. Morrisseau says the day has been uplifting for him and his family, but not every day is like this.
You know, get to take a deep breath today and enjoy my day with all the people that are gathered together. But I got to live with this for the rest of my life, not only me, but, you know, it's all the other families as well, with the 6 other parents that are out there that they have to live with it too as well.
One of those other 6 parents is Tina Harper. Also from Keewaydin, her daughter Robin was 18 when she died in Thunder Bay. Now almost 11 years later, and it's still emotional for Harper to talk about the last time she saw her youngest daughter. The family had just spent Christmas together, and Robin was at the airport waiting to fly out to Thunder Bay for high school.
They were waiting for the plane. There were so many that went out for school.
Harper said though it was difficult, she's grateful she was a part of the inquest.
I was glad I went because I met the other parents, and that really lifted me up. And then I said it made me feel that I wasn't alone.
6 more student memorials will be held at later dates. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News.
Time for a quick break, and then vulnerable Indigenous women who are being targeted by gangs in Thunder Bay. We'll talk to our online reporter Kenneth Jackson about his month-long investigation into what police are calling a nightmare situation.
Beginning, APTN National News and APTN Investigates made a commitment to journalistic excellence.
We were the first Aboriginal network in the world.
Our work has been recognized by respected agencies worldwide. In May 2016, we were recognized with awards from the Canadian Association of Journalists. In October, APTN's Paul Barnsley was presented with the JHR Lifetime Achievement Award in Human Rights Reporting. This past January, APTN accepted an ECPAT Canada Media Award. And most recently in May, APTN was honored with the coveted Canadian Association of Journalists Charles Burry Award in recognition of significant contribution to Canadian journalism. APTN would like to thank you, our viewers, and reaffirm our commitment to you. APTN National News and APTN Investigates, uncovering the stories that others won't.
Welcome back. It's known locally as the Fort William Trap. Gangs from Ottawa and Toronto are in a turf war with Indigenous gangs in Thunder Bay. And caught up in that war are vulnerable Indigenous women. APTN's Kenneth Jackson led APTN's investigation into the gang connection in Thunder Bay.
So Kenneth, what is the Fort William Trap?
Fort William Trap is basically a part of the south end of Thunder Bay. It's inside the trap. There's on the main homeless shelter. It's where all the most visible people on the street are from, and they congregate. We call it the Fort William Trap. Other people do too, because it's hard to get out of there. It's you see people hustling on the streets. You see addicts. You see people who are struggling with life. It's a trap. It's hard to get out of.
And how are Indigenous women being victimized?
Well, outside street gangs from Toronto and Ottawa have been moving into the city of Thunder Bay for a couple of years now, more so than the last year. And when they go there, they're picking on marginalized people, and in Thunder Bay that happens to be First Nations people, particularly women. And we spoke to one woman who had her home taken over. She's obviously has her own addictions and issues that she's dealing with, but they prey on those type of people. They offer them free drugs, free money, but they can take it over. Police told us there that last year they kicked down 2 doors of homes that they thought were trap houses, or like drug houses, and they were, but the gangs had taken over the homes, and inside the homes, the people actually living there were single Indigenous mothers. So it seems to be a trend, and people they're picking on, and not only that, but we've heard some other startling things. They've been known to shave their heads, which, as you know, is quite a thing to do to an Indigenous woman, and it's to overpower them, to take away their dignity, to control them, and We're told that these women are being forced on the streets, which is called prostitution, I guess, but let's be frank, it's rape. It's forced rape. It's not something they want to do. Even those who are on the street on their own will, they're there because they're addicted to drugs. That's not sex trade. That's survival. That's what it is. So they're being victimized by that, by outside gangs, but also, you know, indigenous gangs are there as well, and drug dealers. Like, it's kind of a cycle that repeats itself, but it's becoming more prevalent as outside gangs move in and try and take over turf.
What are local police saying about this?
Well, you know, basically what I told you, like they're trying, Thunder Bay police have gotten a bad rap with death investigations, which is pretty fair. There's been some issues with that, but, you know, and I've looked into those, myself, but with the gangs, like, it's pretty clear that they're trying to get rid of them. They're trying to arrest them. They're trying to, trying to put them in jail. They're trying to disrupt their flow, but there's so many of them, they said. They've filled wings of a local jail there, like with over 20 of them, you know, at one point. They go to court, they get released sometimes, they go, you know, back on the street and do it again. They're hard, you know, it's hard to get rid of it. Like, these guys have a, you know, hate to say it, but like a framework, like it's a business plan essentially, and it's straight out of like the movies, like we've all seen. Like, they know how to do things, and they know how to stay one step ahead of police. Like, they'll use people with, you know, with clean records, so when they get busted, they're back out, you know, that sort of thing. And so they're breaking down doors all over the city, not just in the Fort William Trap downtown in Fort William, all over the city. It's everywhere. Like, I went to these places. Like, there's cameras out front. There's lookouts. There's people who are there to keep people at bay, like me, a reporter, you know, and also cops.
And this has been happening for some time now. Why are we not hearing about it?
Well, I think you hear bits and pieces of it, and I'm not tooting our own horn here, but sometimes it just takes a certain type of reporter or reporters, like, you know, like for us to go up there and to spend a week down in the trap, spend a week talking to people, like, for hours. Like, I talk to people for hours, just sitting there listening to them talk, barely asking a word sometimes, or barely asking a question. It's just a matter of going in and gathering it and putting it together, and no one's really done that yet. Sometimes the best stories are the worst stories, you know, call it what you want, are hiding in plain sight. You just got to put them together.
And we know that the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls hearings are going to be happening in Thunder Bay in 2 weeks. What are you expecting to hear?
I can't really tell you. Like, I think that this should create a bit of stir going into it. I think that, you know, this should be a concerning issue for everyone going into that. You know, not only those who have already died and been murdered or missing or being pulled out of the rivers there. It's happening still. It's happening right now as we speak. Someone probably has their home taken over with a kid in there and doesn't know what to do.
Disturbing stuff. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Kenneth.
Thank you.
Of course, things are not all dark in Thunder Bay. After the break, we look at the many ways people in the community, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, are working to keep kids safe. Welcome back. Brandon Kakapetum and Kobe Peters know what it's like to leave their community behind for a high school diploma. They've both graduated, but they have not left Thunder Bay.
Brandon Kakapetum has been patrolling these trails since he was a grade 12 student.
Well, we usually just walk around here and look around, see if there's anybody around. We'll go up and down this path, and then we check out the other spots.
That was more than 3 years ago. Like hundreds of First Nations students across northern Ontario, Kakapetum left his community to attend high school in Thunder Bay.
I missed my parents and missed my family back home. But I knew I was just going to leave them. I knew I was going to leave them anyways.
Kobe Peters patrols with Kakapetum. They both graduated high school in Thunder Bay, and they both live with family while here.
Yeah, that definitely helped me, being here with my family, having the support, and having them help me throughout high school.
These two graduates are familiar with the tragedies that have struck students just like them. Kakapetum recalls when Jordan Wabass was found by the Kaministiquia River.
And then I remember my mom telling me, like, make sure you don't hang around by yourself. Don't go walking around by yourself. Don't go.
Now he's trying to help keep other students safe.
Like, a lot of things happen on this river, I guess. Like the Aboriginal bodies being found here, mostly youth. So we're out here monitoring these areas and ensuring the safety of the students in case they are ever hanging around here.
Well, that all sounds really good. I'd say you're a pretty healthy little girl.
May Cat has been the nurse practitioner at Dennis Franklin Cromartie High School for the last 15 years. She found students were not only lonely for family, but they were arriving with high levels of trauma.
But when they come out to the city, their safety from their home community is gone, and so the symptoms seem to exacerbate when they're in a city.
So she developed a specialized treatment program and brought it to 6 remote First Nations in Northern Ontario. Her treatment model involves a holistic, community-based approach.
We have ceremony, we have land, we have culture, we have our elders.
And the treatment services have worked. When it first started 5 years ago, there were 63 students requiring treatment. But she said students are still experiencing traumas and symptoms, and there is still a need for programs.
So if our children have that land-based experience, their risk for, severe emotional symptoms are probably going to be a lot lower if they had that strength sort of inside them before they came out to a city like Thunder Bay.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Addiction is another way youth get trapped into a dangerous and bad life. 2 former addicts tell us why they got hooked, how they got clean, and how they are reaching out to help others.
Janie, I gotta do the blue too?
Crystal Morrison is making a ribbon skirt using her traditional colors. Just 2 years ago, Crystal was sitting at a different table. Addicted to methadone and alcohol, she was caught in what is known as the Fort William Trap, the downtown core of the city's south side.
There was a lot of stabbings that happened there. There were shootings that happened there. There was gangs. People were afraid that time of walking home. Yeah.
Morrison has lived in Thunder Bay her whole life. As a child, she grew up in foster care and forced to deal with the realities that came with it.
Abuse surrounded that home that I was placed in.
Morrison was on her own by the time she was 15. She later started a family with her spouse. Then her addictions took over.
My identity and where I belonged, because those were the things that were missing in my life. And, I felt lost without it.
Ron Kanutsky was a young man when he first came to Thunder Bay more than 2 decades ago.
I came here to get away from, because where I came from, everyone else was the problem. I don't have a problem. It's my family. It's my girlfriend. It's my friends. It's this community.
He said he eventually figured out he was the one with the problem.
And then it came down to realize that I can't run away from what I'm dealing with. I got to take a look at what's going on for me, right?
Since then, Kanutsky, a musician and comedian, has worked with treatment centers and youth.
I have a saying now that I always say, I had to feed my spirit something different than what I was feeding it.
He said there are too many lives being lost to drug addictions and suicide, not only in the city, but in surrounding communities.
Right now, it's an epidemic. It's out of control, and we just don't have enough services to even deal with this right now.
Kanutsky has been using culture and traditional practices to reach out to children for 17 years.
When they were going home at night, things weren't good at home. But when they were hanging out, coming out with us and participating and creating and building things and looking at opportunities, they started to grow. They started to shine. And some of those young people today are adults.
Morrison also turned her life around. She found a group of women who shared similar experiences over a year ago.
We're sobriety sisters. We're all aiming for the same thing, and it's to be who we are and not afraid to show it, so to speak.
Known as the Powwow Rangers, culture and tradition is an important part of their recovery. Morrison and Kanutsky work with communities needing support for addictions and substance abuse issues.
We're just sort of helping people see that where they are is not where they have to be, that there is hope, that there is light, there is help, there is supports.
Morrison said sometimes people just need to know someone is there for them.
And that's what's lacking, is love, you know, just somebody to listen, somebody to say, hey, I care about you.
Despite the tragic losses in Thunder Bay over the years, Knutski remains hopeful for the city he said he loves. And there needs to be more efforts to reach out to those who are struggling.
These aren't just names, these are human beings, you know, and they're lost. And we've got to help people find their way back.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
We leave you tonight with this story. It's about how good food is making good neighbors between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities in Thunder Bay.
Stan and Peggy Dromiski are excited about their new neighbors moving into the neighborhood. They even brought a welcome gift. For years, the Dromiskis have lived across the street from what used to be a long-term care home.
And all of a sudden, we get news that there could be an influx of young people, not old people waiting for the final day.
But the former Grandview Lodge was recently gifted to the 9 Matawa First Nations for a student education and care center. It's intended to be a safe place for high school students in Thunder Bay. Celindine Whitehead is from Webequie First Nation. The grade 11 student says she's looking forward to the new center.
Different, I guess, than what they have right now, because it's like a small, just like 3 classrooms, and then having a bigger building with actual more classes, and then they'll be having I don't know, it's just going to be different, change. I like it.
The center will also be a residence for up to 100 students. Whitehead says the location is more convenient.
That's what I like, that it's just down the road, so I don't need to be catching the bus, and for it takes like an hour for me to get to school. So just like, I like it that it's only a 10-minute walk.
As they prepare to move in, staff and students fired up the grill for a neighborhood barbecue, hoping to alleviate any concerns their new neighbors may have. And the Dromiskis couldn't be happier about it.
I don't think we're going to have any kind of problem. I think we're going to have a good relationship.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
That's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you next time.